The ad was a godsend, or at least that's what I told myself back then. House sitter wanted, remote historic property, excellent compensation. Discretion, essential. It was just a little paper flyer on a community board, stuck up next to ads for lost cats and guitar lessons. My lease was almost up, my bank account was looking pretty sad, and honestly, getting out of the city's constant noise for some peace and quiet sounded like pure heaven. I remember feeling this huge wave of relief, like a weight just lifted off my chest, thinking, finally, a real chance. All that worry about where I'd live, what I'd do next, it just disappeared right then. The address took me miles outside of Port Isabel, down this long, bumpy dirt road that finally opened up to an old Victorian house. It wasn't falling apart, but it had that quiet, kind of sad look to it. The kind of place that had seen a lot of life, and you just knew. There's plenty of stories hidden in its peeling paint and creaky floors. Mr. Abernathy, the owner, was a really thin, private guy, with eyes that seemed to constantly dart around, like he was looking for something that wasn't quite there. But he seemed nice enough, and the money he offered was way more than I expected for what seemed like a simple job. Just keep the place neat, water the plants, and make sure no one broke in. While he was gone on some long business trip, his shifty eyes did make me a little nervous for a second. Just a tiny, uneasy feeling, but the huge relief of having a place to stay, and the promise of good money, easily pushed those doubts away. What's the worst that could happen, I thought, even chuckling a bit to myself. The first few days were amazing. The quiet was so deep, only broken by crickets at night and a hawk crying out during the day. It was completely different from the non-stop city noise I was used to. I found myself just sitting on the porch for hours, drinking lukewarm coffee and watching the sunlight peek through the old oak trees around the house. It felt like taking a huge deep breath after holding it in for way too long. The house itself was like a giant maze of old rooms, most of them locked, but the main parts, the kitchen, the living room, and my bedroom upstairs, were surprisingly well kept, though a bit dusty. They were full of a strange mix of old furniture and weird little trinkets. I started exploring carefully, drawn in by the quiet feeling of history that seemed to fill every corner. I noticed little things, like the faded tapestry in the dining room that showed a scene I couldn't quite figure out, or the faint, almost there smell of something like old paper and dried roses that hung in the air in some hallways. It was a comforting, old-fashioned smell, like visiting my grandma's attic, a scent that hinted at forgotten stories and cozy evenings. It was all kind of charming, really, like stepping back in time. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years, a real relaxation settling deep inside me, easing the constant stress I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I even started sketching in my old notebook again, something I hadn't done since college, feeling genuinely inspired by how peaceful and pretty the place was. The first weird thing that happened was so small, I almost thought I imagined it. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes after a simple dinner of canned soup, and I clearly heard a soft, steady tapping coming from upstairs. It sounded like fingernails on wood, light but there. I stopped, tilted my head, really listening, but it stopped as fast as it started. All I could hear was the gentle drip of the faucet and the distant creaking of the old house settling. I laughed to myself, blaming it on the old house making noises at night, or maybe a branch scraping against a window. I told myself that after living in a tiny apartment for so long, any strange sound was going to make me jumpy. Just the house talking to itself, I mumbled, a small nervous laugh escaping my lips. But even as I said it, a tiny knot of unease started to form in my stomach. The next morning, though, I found a small, fancy wooden box on my bedside table. I was absolutely sure it hadn't been there when I went to sleep. Its surface was smooth under my fingers. No dust at all. A little shiver of unease, just a tiny one, ran up my spine. I quickly told myself that maybe Mr. Abernathy had left it for me. A small, kind gesture, though it was odd he hadn't said anything. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, feeling the cool, smooth wood, and wondered for a second if it was some kind of welcome gift. But then I just brushed the thought off, figuring it was probably just a random thing from one of the locked rooms that had somehow gotten moved during a recent cleaning. Things started to get weirder, slowly, sneaky-like. The tapping came back more often now, sometimes from the walls, sometimes from the ceiling right above me. It was a constant, almost purposeful sound that seemed to follow me from room to room. I started checking the windows, the attic opening, even the crawl space under the house. Nothing. Absolutely nothing to explain the phantom tapping. A growing feeling of annoyance, mixed with a new fear, started to build inside me. I'd even snap "What was that?" out loud, only to be met with the heavy silence, which just made me feel completely stupid. Then came the whispers, faint at first, like dry leaves rustling, just barely audible. They were unclear, but definitely there, coming from the locked rooms. I found myself pressing my ear against the old wooden doors, trying to hear words, meaning anything. But the sounds would disappear the moment I listened too hard, leaving me feeling silly and more alone. The comfortable quiet of the house started to change into something else, something less friendly, more watchful. My imagination, which usually helped me feel calm and creative, now felt like a mean trickster, turning every shadow into a possible threat, every creak into a warning. I started sleeping with a lamp on. The small circle of light was a weak comfort against the growing darkness. The once peaceful silence of the house now felt heavy, pressing down on me, thick with unspoken things. One evening, as I was reading in the living room, the faint smell of old paper and dried roses, which I had actually liked at first, got much stronger, almost sickly sweet. I felt a sudden unexplainable chill, a wave of coldness that filled the room, making goosebumps pop up on my arms. And then, slowly, one of the really old leather-bound books on the shelf across from me slid forward, inching out until it hung dangerously on the edge, before dropping to the floor with a soft thud. It made me jump, a real shock that made my heart pound against my ribs. I just stared at it, a thick book with no clear title, its pages yellow and crispy with age. The smell of roses was almost overpowering now, and it was then standing over the fallen book that I noticed a small, almost invisible piece of paper tucked between its pages. It was a thin, handwritten note, with elegant but disturbingly neat writing, which simply said, "Rule 1. Never leave the house after dusk. They watch." The blood drained from my face. A cold, awful feeling seeped into my very bones. Suddenly, the tapping, the whispers, the moving objects, they weren't just random things anymore. They were on purpose, a sort of introduction, a terrifying hello to something I was just starting to understand. And the charming old house changed, right then, into a cage. Its walls now felt like they were closing in, its silence now a clear threat. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt cold sweat break out on my forehead. My mind was spinning, trying to connect the cozy charm with this terrifying command. They? Who are they? The question screamed in my head, but there was no answer, just a hollow echo of pure, gut-wrenching fear. The rules started showing up more often, appearing in the weirdest spots, tucked under my pillow, taped to the bathroom mirror, or sometimes. And this was the creepiest. I'm already sitting open on my kitchen counter, as if someone had just placed it there seconds before I walked in. Each rule was written in the same fancy handwriting, each one more specific, stranger, and infinitely more terrifying than the last. Rule 2. At precisely 3 a.m., you must light the candle in the master bedroom and sit in the rocking chair until the flame goes out. Do not close your eyes. Do not make a sound. I found this one taped inside the pantry door. The pure nerve of it, the chilling expectation, sent a fresh wave of panic through me. But a deeper, more basic fear, a paralyzing feeling of being helpless, also settled in, telling me I had no choice but to obey. My hands shook as I carefully peeled it off. The paper felt strangely cold. The idea of sitting in a dark room, eyes wide open, felt like a scene from a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The first time I did what it said, the silence in the master bedroom was so loud it hurt my ears, made even louder by the frantic pounding of my own heart. The candle flame flickered with an unnatural brightness, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to twist and stretch across the walls. I swore, in the darkest corners of the room, I could almost make out vague, shifting shapes, quick glimpses of something not quite human just at the very edge of my sight. The air got heavy, impossibly cold, filled with an unseen presence that pushed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I sat there, stiff with terror, my eyes burning, not daring to blink, until the last whisper of the flame died, leaving me in total, suffocating darkness. And it was then, in that deep blackness, that I heard it. A soft, deep sigh. A sound that seemed to come from the very house itself. A sound of deep satisfaction. My whole body went stiff, every muscle locked up. I just wanted to scream, to run, but some force stronger than my own will held me there, frozen in the chair. Am a guy all alone in this house, and things are getting weird and scary, even for me, a guy? The third rule appeared on a bookmark in the book that had fallen to the floor, a chilling order that sealed my growing horror. Rule 3. You must feed the garden every third night. Use only the freshest soil from beneath the willow tree. Do not look directly into the hole. The garden was overgrown, a mess of thorny bushes and dead flowers. The willow tree stood way at the back of the property, its droopy branches like long, bony fingers reaching towards the ground. The first time I went out there, under the sickly pale glow of the moon, the silence of the night was creepy, only broken by the rustling of unseen creatures in the bushes. The dirt under the willow was surprisingly soft, almost damp, even though the weather had been dry. When I pushed my small shovel into the soil, a faint, sweet, metallic smell, like old blood and damp earth, rose up to meet me, making my stomach turn. But I followed the instructions, carefully avoiding looking into the shallow hole I dug. As I finished, a faint, high-pitched scratching sound, something trying to claw its way out from underground, echoed from somewhere deep in the garden. I scrambled back to the house, my heart pounding, convinced I had heard something. Something truly impossible, but I couldn't be sure, and the not knowing was almost as terrifying as the sound itself. My hands were sweaty. My legs felt like jelly. I burst through the back door, slamming it shut behind me, leaning against it, gasping for air. That metallic smell still in my nose, making my throat tighten. The rules kept coming faster, more demanding, and increasingly gross. Rule 4. The mirrors show what is. Cover them all from sunset till sunrise. Do not peek. I found this one written on the foggy bathroom mirror itself. A wave of sickness washed over me, a deep feeling of being violated. I quickly threw towels and old sheets over every shiny surface in the house. The simple act felt like a desperate attempt to keep some invisible evil away. The house, now without its reflections, felt even darker, more suffocating, as if the shadows themselves had gotten deeper, had become real. Every time I walked past a covered mirror, I felt a shiver, a little prickle of knowing, as if something were watching me from behind the fabric, waiting for me to mess up. Rule 5. The pantry whispers at midnight. Leave a single piece of fresh bread on the top shelf. Do not talk back to the voices. They will try to trick you. The first time I did this, standing in the small, dark pantry, the air got thick with a loud mess of whispers, a swirling mix of unclear voices. Some were begging, some were threatening, some sounded eerily like my own, calling my name, promising freedom, threatening punishment. I clapped my hands over my ears, tears streaming down my face, fighting the huge urge to scream, to answer, to beg for it to stop. It lasted for what felt like forever, the voices swirling around me, through me, until, as suddenly as they started, they stopped. All that was left was a chilling, empty silence. And the knowledge that I had been tested, watched, judged, and somehow I had passed, filled me with a terrifying kind of relief. My legs felt weak, and I slumped against the pantry door once it was over, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. The echoes of the voices still ringing in my ears, making my head pound. The things I found started to match the rules in their unsettling nature. I found old, faded, yellowish photographs in a locked drawer in the study. Pictures of families, smiling, posed, but with an unsettling sameness. Their eyes, in every single picture, were somehow blank, empty, with a strange glassy shine to them. And I noticed the same wooden box that had appeared on my bedside table in the hands of a child in one of the photographs. It was a chilling detail that connected me for good to the house's hidden past, past that seemed to reach out and pull me in with icy fingers. My blood ran cold, and I dropped the photographs, scattering them across the dusty floor. The casual appearance of that box, now a terrifying clue, felt like a cruel joke, a taunt from whatever evil haunted this place. In the dusty attic, while looking for more sheets to cover the increasing number of mirrors, I tripped over a pile of neatly kept journals. Their pages were brittle with age, filled with the same elegant handwriting as the rules. The entries written by previous people who lived in the house described their own slow slide into madness, their struggles to follow the increasingly strange orders, their desperate pleas for release, and their eventual horrifying surrender to whatever dark thing lived within the walls. Their last entries often just stopped in unreadable scribbles, taken over by a clear terror. Reading their words, their shared experiences, confirmed my worst fears. I wasn't alone in this horror, and I was trapped. The line between what was real and what I was imagining blurred more and more each day. With each new rule, each new discovery, I found myself questioning everything, my own sanity, even if reality itself was real. The ground I once thought was solid beneath my feet now felt like shifting sand. A chilling thought hit me. I wasn't house-sitting, I was house-trapped. A prisoner in a messed-up game with rules I didn't understand and a future I couldn't escape. My appearance started to show how much I was falling apart inside. My eyes were always red and tired, sunken in their sockets, shadowed by sleepless nights spent obeying unseen commands. My skin had turned pale, almost see-through, as if the very light was draining out of me. A constant tremor ran through my hands, a nervous twitch that showed the endless worry gnawing at my insides. I'd catch glimpses of myself in the uncovered parts of the house, in the faint reflections on the window at dusk, and barely recognize the thin, haunted face staring back at me. The smell of old paper and dried roses, which I had initially found rather pleasant, now filled everything. It clung to my clothes, my hair, even seemed to come from my own skin. It was a sickly sweet smell that made my stomach upset. I couldn't escape it anymore, even when I tried to air out the house. The smell stubbornly stuck to every surface. A constant reminder of the sneaky corruption that had taken root within these walls. The whispers weren't just barely audible anymore. They were a constant murmur, a low, deep hum that vibrated in the very air around me. Sometimes they were clear enough to make out individual words, bits of names, threats, promises, all designed to break me, to tempt me into not following the rules. The line between my own thoughts and outside influences became impossible to tell apart. A terrifying mix that left me feeling completely powerless. I found myself whispering back sometimes, not words, just sounds, trying to quiet the noise in my head, but it was no use.